All right, let's jump right into PPG Industries' latest earnings call. The hoax behind those colorful coatings you see everywhere. They just finished up Q4 2024. And let me tell you, they've been busy shaking things up. Think of it this way. PPG decided to Marie Kondo their business. They got rid of anything that just wasn't sparking joy profit-wise.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And the result, a leaner, meaner, more focused PTG. They're zeroing in on what they excel at.
Oh.
High-tech coatings with huge growth potential.
Exactly. And the market seems to have taken notice. Even with some economic hiccups, they managed to pull off a really impressive quarter.
Definitely impressive. Adjusted earnings per share jumped 6% year over year, landing at $1.61. And of course, that's excluding those pesky currency fluctuations.
Which is
a bit of a roller coaster lately.
Yeah, currency swings can definitely make things confusing. But even when you factor them in, it's still a solid performance, especially considering all the economic headwinds out there.
Absolutely. And for the full year, adjusted earnings per share came in at $7.87, also up 6% year over year. So even with all the strategic changes they made, they still managed to keep those profits climbing.
Okay, let's talk about this strategic maneuvering, because it's been huge news in the coatings world. PPG basically hit the reset button on their portfolio, divesting two major parts of their business.
Right, and this is where things get really interesting. The first divestiture was their U.S. and Canada architectural coatings business. You know, the paint you see at Home Depot and Lowe's.
Yeah, that's a massive market, but it's also super competitive and not always the most profitable.
Exactly. By selling off that part of the business, PPG is basically saying, we're focusing on higher margin, higher growth areas. They're doubling down on those specialized coatings where they have a real technological edge.
And the second divestiture,
their
silica products business. Now, silica might not be the hottest topic at a cocktail party, but it's a critical ingredient in tons of industrial applications.
It is. But for PPG, it was kind of a side gig, not really in line with their core strengths. By getting rid of this business, they're sending a clear message. We're laser focused on being the global leader in advanced coatings technologies.
So they've trimmed down the portfolio and they're looking lean and mean. But how do they want investors to view this new PPG? Well, they've also revamped their segment reporting to give us a better picture of how each part of the business is performing.
Transparency is always a good thing. Right. They've now got three main segments: global architectural coatings, performance coatings, and industrial coatings. This new structure gives us a much more detailed view of their operations.
And the really interesting detail here is that two of those segments, global architectural and performance coatings, are already boasting full-year EBITDA margins above 20%. That's some serious profitability.
It is. It tells you they're operating at a high level, squeezing every bit of profit out of those businesses. It really shows their operational efficiency and the pricing power they have in those markets.
So, we've got a streamlined portfolio, a revamped reporting structure, and impressive profitability. But let's zoom in on Q4 specifically. Did they manage to deliver the goods, despite those economic headwinds we talked about?
Well, it was a bit of a mixed bag, as you might expect. They had some challenges in Europe, where consumer confidence is weak and industrial production is sluggish. That definitely had an impact on their architectural and industrial coatings businesses.
That makes sense. Those are the segments that are most sensitive to economic ups and downs.
Right. But here's the thing. They still found pockets of strength. Their aerospace coatings business, for example, absolutely took off in Q4.
Yeah. They mentioned record sales in aerospace with double-digit organic growth. And get this, their backlog of orders for aerospace coatings actually grew to a whopping $300 million. That's a strong indicator that things are going well in that segment.
Absolutely. It shows that PPG is at the forefront of a booming industry as airlines increase production. And demand for new aircraft keeps rising. PPG is perfectly positioned to capitalize on that growth.
They also highlighted strong performance in their protective and marine coatings business. These are the high-performance coatings you find on ships, bridges, oil rigs, basically anything that needs to withstand tough conditions.
And this is another area where PPG's specialized expertise really stands out. They're known for developing cutting-edge solutions that are durable, resistant to corrosion, and environmentally friendly.
So even with those economic headwinds, they managed to deliver a solid Q4 performance. Strong aerospace and protective and marine coatings helped balance out some of the weakness in other areas.
Exactly. It's a testament to their diversified portfolio and their ability to execute even in a challenging environment.
And speaking of execution, they also talked about their impressive track record of margin improvement. This was their 9th consecutive quarter of aggregate segment margin improvement.
Think about that for a second. 9 straight quarters. That's over 2 years of consistently getting more profit out of each dollar of sales. It says a lot about their operational discipline
Yeah.
and their focus on profitability.
Absolutely. They've managed to do this even as input costs have been rising and supply chains have been disrupted. That's not easy to do.
Not at all. It shows they're good at managing costs, negotiating well with suppliers, and raising prices when needed.
It also suggests they're not just cutting costs randomly, they're doing it strategically, while still investing in areas that will drive future growth.
Right. And that brings us to another interesting point. While they were busy divesting parts of their business, they were also busy buying back their own stock. They used a cool $250 million on share repurchases in Q4, and they're planning to spend another $400 million in the first quarter of 2025.
What's the message there?
Well, it signals a few things. First, they believe their stock is undervalued, and they're putting their money where their mouth is. Second, it shows they're committed to giving value back to shareholders. And third, it suggests they have a lot of confidence in their future. They wouldn't be buying back stock if they weren't optimistic about their ability to generate strong earnings growth.
That makes sense. So, to recap, we've got a company that's strategically reshaping itself, focusing on high-growth, high-margin areas, while delivering solid financial performance and rewarding shareholders. What's not to like?
Well, nothing is ever perfect.
Right.
They're still facing some economic headwinds, and there's always the risk that their strategic bets won't work out as they expect. But overall, I think they've positioned themselves really well for success.
I agree. They're playing the long game, and they're doing it with a clear vision and a disciplined approach. Now, before we dive deeper into their earnings call and their outlook for 2025, let's take a moment to hear from you. What are your initial thoughts on PPG's transformation? What jumps out at you so far? Leave us a voice message or find us on social media. We'd love to hear your perspective.
Welcome back. It sounds like we got some great insights from our listeners on PPG's transformation.
Yeah, it's always interesting to hear what other folks are thinking.
Now let's get down to business and dig into some more details from their earnings call.
Okay, so we talked about PPG's decision to sell off their US and Canada architectural coatings business. It was a big move, but what's the reasoning behind it? What were they trying to achieve?
It's all about focusing on areas where they have a clear competitive edge and can generate sustainable and profitable growth.
You mean like those high-tech coatings they're emphasizing?
Exactly. They're doubling down on their technological advantage, their global reach, and segments where they can command premium pricing. It's like moving away from the crowded, noisy, do-it-yourself market and focusing on the specialized, high-end projects where their expertise really shines.
So they're basically saying, we're not just selling paint, we're selling solutions.
Precisely. And this new segment reporting structure really highlights that shift. We can now see much more clearly how each segment contributes to the bottom line and where their growth engines are.
Let's take a look at the global architectural coatings segment for a minute. They're facing some headwinds in Europe, but Mexico seems to be a bright spot, right?
Absolutely. Their comics brand is a powerhouse in Mexico, and they're smartly leveraging that distribution network to expand into other product categories, like protective and marine coatings, traffic solutions, even refinish products for cars.
So they're not just painting houses in Mexico, they're branching out into all sorts of coatings applications.
Exactly. They're turning that existing network into a multi-pronged growth engine. It's a clever strategy.
Now, let's switch gears to performance coatings. Aerospace is booming. But what about the other businesses in this segment? How are they positioned?
Automotive refinish is another area where PPG excels. Their advanced technologies and digital tools are giving them an edge in a very competitive market.
They mentioned winning over new customers, even though the number of collision claims was down last year. That's impressive.
It is. It means they're gaining market share, and they're doing it by offering superior products and services.
And they're not just focused on cars. Their protective and marine coatings business is also doing well, posting 7 consecutive quarters of year-over-year sales volume growth.
Think about all the infrastructure projects going on around the world. Bridges, pipelines, wind turbines, offshore oil platforms. PPG's coatings are protecting those assets and keeping them running smoothly.
Okay, so we've got strong aerospace, solid refinish, and surging protective and marine coatings. Performance coatings is looking like a real star performer for PPG.
It is. And let's not forget about industrial coatings, even though it's facing some near-term challenges.
Right, global industrial production is a bit sluggish, but PPG is still focused on grabbing market share.
Those $100 million in annual share gains they secured are proof of that. They're playing the long game, positioning themselves for when the market rebounds.
And they're not just sitting around waiting for things to improve. They're actively taking steps to reduce costs and streamline their operations to weather the storm.
Exactly. They're being proactive. Think of it like this. They're tightening their belts and getting their house in order so that when the economy picks up, they'll be ready to sprint ahead of the competition.
I like that analogy. So we've got a focused portfolio, a leaner cost structure, and a commitment to organic growth. What else is there to consider?
Well, they did mention exploring strategic M&A opportunities. That could be an interesting wild card to keep an eye on.
Right. They've made it pretty clear that acquisitions aren't their top priority right now, but they're not ruling anything out.
If the right opportunity comes along, one that fits well with their existing portfolio and accelerates their growth strategy, they might just go for it.
It would definitely be a bold move, especially with their current focus on organic growth.
It would. But it could also be a game changer, allowing them to quickly expand into new markets or acquire key technologies that would take years to develop in-house.
All right, let's take a moment to think about what we've learned so far. PPG is going through a significant transformation, one that's driven by a clear vision and a disciplined execution strategy.
They're not just reacting to market conditions, they're actively shaping their future. They're making tough choices and investing in their core strengths.
And even with the current economic headwinds, they're confident in their ability to deliver sustainable, profitable growth. It's an impressive story, to say the least.
It is, but as always, the details matter. So in our next segment, we'll delve even deeper into PPG's earnings call, analyzing their commentary on specific business units, geographic regions, and those all-important growth drivers. Stay tuned.
Welcome back. Ready to wrap up our deep dive into PPG's Q4 earnings call?
Absolutely. We've got a lot more ground to cover.
You know, one thing that stood out to me was how much PPG's leadership emphasized their people.
Oh, yeah, I noticed that too. They talked a lot about investing in their employees and giving them the tools they need to succeed.
Exactly. They made it clear that this transformation isn't just about numbers. It's about creating a culture where employees feel valued and empowered.
I think that's really smart because at the end of the day, it's the people who drive innovation and make things happen.
Right, you can have the best strategy in the world, but if you don't have the right people on board, it's not going to get you very far. Speaking of strategy, let's talk about some of the geographic trends that PPG highlighted. We already touched on the strength of their Comex brand in Mexico.
Right. That's a real success story for them.
But what about other regions? Where do they see the most potential?
Well, they're definitely excited about the growth opportunities in Latin America.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
That region has a lot of momentum right now.
Yeah, strong GDP growth, plus that whole nearshoring trend we've been hearing about.
Right, companies bringing their manufacturing operations closer to home.
Exactly. All of that is creating a really favorable environment for PPG's industrial and architectural coatings businesses.
They're also pretty optimistic about India.
Yeah, their joint venture with Asian Paints is giving them a big presence there.
Asian Paints is like the giant of the Indian paint market.
It is. So that partnership gives PPG a huge advantage. They're tapping into an established distribution network and leveraging all that local expertise.
Smart move.
And even though China's recovery has been a bit slower than expected, PPG is still seeing decent growth there, especially in automotive and aerospace.
They seem to be taking a long-term view on China.
Yeah, they're not letting short-term fluctuations throw them off course. They're focused on building strong relationships and positioning themselves for success in the long run.
Okay, so we've got a mix of regions with strong growth potential, along with some that are facing challenges.
That's to be expected in a global market, right?
Absolutely. But the important thing is that PPG is actively managing its geographic footprint. They're investing in those high-growth markets while also optimizing their presence in more mature regions.
Sounds like a sound approach.
Okay, last but not least, let's wrap things up with a focus on those key growth drivers that PPG is counting on to shape their future. What's at the top of their list?
Well, it all starts with those organic growth capabilities we've been talking about. They're putting a lot of resources into research and development, coming up with new products, and finding ways to differentiate themselves from the competition.
They're not just resting on their laurels. They're pushing the envelope.
Exactly. And they're also super focused on what they call commercial excellence. That means optimizing their sales processes, building stronger customer relationships, and driving operational efficiency.
Basically making it as easy and rewarding as possible for customers to do business with them.
Right. And they're using digitalization to do that. leveraging data and technology to improve customer interactions, streamline their operations, and even create new revenue streams.
It's like adding a whole digital layer to their traditional coatings business.
Exactly. And of course, we can't forget about their commitment to sustainability. They're
Yeah.
taking steps to reduce their environmental impact and developing products that meet the growing demand for eco-friendly solutions.
Which is not only good for the planet, but also good for business. Consumers and businesses alike are increasingly looking for sustainable options.
For sure. And PPG is positioning themselves as a leader in that space.
All right, so there you have it, a comprehensive look at PPG Industries and their Q4 2024 earnings call.
We've covered their strategic transformation, financial performance, geographic trends, and growth drivers, with even a little bit of leadership insight sprinkled in.
We hope you found this deep dive informative and engaging. Of course, this is just a snapshot of where PPG stands today. Their journey is far from over.
But based on what we've seen and heard, they seem to be on the right track.
Now, before we sign off, it's time for our This Is Not Financial Advice segment, where we toss out a totally outrageous yet strangely plausible trade idea.
Just to reiterate, this is purely for entertainment, definitely not investment advice. Always do your own research and talk to a financial advisor before making any decisions.
Absolutely. Okay, so PPG is betting big on the aerospace industry, and their order backlog suggests that's a smart move.
Right, they're killing it in aerospace.
And they're not just providing coatings for planes, they're also a major supplier to the space industry.
Rockets, satellites, the whole shebang.
So here's our crazy idea. What if we combine PPG's strong position in aerospace with the growing space tourism sector?
Ooh, now that's thinking outside the box.
Imagine a world where space tourism becomes increasingly affordable. As more people travel beyond Earth, they'll need specialized coatings to protect their spacecraft from those harsh space conditions.
And who better to provide those coatings than PPG? They've got decades of experience in aerospace and a proven track record of innovation.
Exactly. So here's our wild yet oddly compelling trade idea. Buy PPG stock as a long-term play on the growth of space tourism.
It's a bet that as space tourism takes off, so will PPG's profits.
Now, this is obviously highly speculative. No guarantee that space tourism will go mainstream anytime soon. But if it does, PPG could be in a prime position to benefit.
And that's what makes this idea so outrageous, yet so intriguing, a high-risk, high-reward scenario that could potentially lead to big gains.
All right, folks, that's all for this episode of The Deep Dive.
Thanks for joining us. We hope you learned a thing or two about the coatings industry.
Until next time, happy investing, everyone.